This video is the second part of me talking about the history of Mikoshi Chiyo and the Iwakura clan from the video game Genshin Impact. If you haven't seen the first video, you might want to take a look as I try to set the foundations for what I want to talk about in this video. I will leave the link on the screen, or you can just go to my channel to look for it. With that out of the way, let's continue with the video. By the time of the Sakoku Decree and the resulting civil war between the shogunate and Watatsumi Island, the shoshu of the Iwakura clan was Iwakura Mitsunari, also known as Koin. While there is not a lot of exposition on Mitsunari, we can assume a few things about him from his dialogue. He did have a vision which was confiscated by the Sakoku Decree, at which point Mitsunari, like many other former vision bearers, lost his ambition and his drive. However, he does regain some of these attributes back after he finds out about his student's fate later on. Mitsunari has only been the head of the Iwakura clan for a short period of time, as the other living members of the school we encounter still remember training under his predecessor, Ein. While he speaks fondly of them, he considers himself as a failure of a teacher, even after he regained a clear head. He thinks that under his leadership the Iwakura art has waned, so there might actually have been troubles before the decree was issued. Mitsunari also does not have children, which makes him the last blood relative to the Oni warrior Mikoshi Chiyo. The confiscation of the visions led to even more turmoil. Arguments broke out between the remaining practitioners of the Iwakura art, and finally, the two strongest members of the school, Yanagiha Arashi and Okazaki Doraemon, would be expelled by Mitsunari. Mitsunari himself can't really explain why, but following these events, he disbanded the Iwakura dojo and joined the shogun's army as a martial arts instructor. This was most likely due to the effect of him losing his vision. In the meantime, the remaining practitioners of the Iwakura art have gone rogue. Without their place in society, they have no other choice but to turn to banditry, using their martial arts to survive the land plagued by civil war. Yet, fate has it that all of them at some point encounter an outsider, a warrior not from within Inazuma, not even from within Tevat, and they all, one after another, fall to this warrior's blade. One day in the shogunate's camp at the front lines of the war, Mitsunari too encounters said traveler. He learns what happens to his comrades after he abandoned them. Then, a very unusual thing happens. People whose visions have been taken by the Sakoku Decree tend to lose all their ambition. They don't really live anymore, they only exist. When Mitsunari talks to the traveler, however, he remembers the times spent with his comrades. He remembers what he felt in those days, and he also remembers his pride and duty as a swordsman, which compels him to challenge the traveler to a duel. Mitsunari fell, and with him the bloodline of Iwakura Doin, the bloodline of Mikoshi Chiyo, ended. Mitsunari must have seen this coming, as he admitted that even though he was the head of the Iwakura art, he had already forgotten their secret technique. Yet, in the end, he chose to fall by the sword, to follow his dreams and ambitions, and to honor the deeds and sacrifices of his comrades until his last breath. With Mitsunari dead, all practitioners of the Iwakura art have perished, with two exceptions. Arashi and Doraemon, who had been expelled by Mitsunari, are still alive. They have been, next to Mitsunari himself, the strongest members of the dojo, earning the titles of Menkyo Kaiden. The two of them have heard about what happened to Mitsunari and the other swordsmen of Iwakura, and decided to find their bodies and their swords to grant them their final honor, setting up a memorial at Byaku Plains. There, Arashi and Doraemon swear to avenge their fallen brethren, and they shall soon get their chance, as they too cross paths with the mysterious Outlander. Their fate, however, shall be the same as their comrades. At the Blade Mount, Arashi and Doraemon have collected all the swords of the members of the Iwakura art. One blade, however, is missing, the Hakuen Michimitsu Amenoma, the blade that has been made by the Amenoma clan, one of the great smithing schools of the Raiden Gokuden. It was ordered by Iwakura Michihiro 500 years earlier, when he founded his school. As it turns out, the blade would be found in one of the most unlikely places imaginable, the Serpent's Bowels in Enkanomiya. Now, for those of you who don't know about Enkanomiya, the place has a really complex story in and of itself, and to go over all of it would take way too long. But to keep it simple, it is a land underneath Watatsumi Island that houses the remnants of an old civilization who actually were the ancestors of the people now living at Watatsumi Island and waging a war against the shogunate and the Sakoku decree. You can usually reach it through a portal in the pool in the middle of Watatsumi, but there are supposedly other routes too. The blade is found very close to the entrance, at the foot of a waterfall. This is one of the more puzzling things in the game, as we have absolutely no clues as to how it arrived here. There are some theories on the internet, but most of what I could find was simply just guessing. So let's take a look at everything we actually know so far. The gate to Enkanomiya opens only every 1,000 years or so that the ritual to cleanse the soil of Watatsumi Island can be held. So this means the sword can only have been left there quite recently, since the sword itself is only 500 years old. We know that Michihiro had made it when he started the Iwakura school, and the last time the way to Enkanomiya was open, the sword simply did not exist yet. However, we know from Enjo that there are other ways to enter the realm, but we can also say quite certainly that the only ones who know and use those ways are members of the Abyss Order, since, except for the Wishaps, the only living beings we encounter in Enkanomiya are members or vassals of the Abyss. So while definitely not impossible, I do not see the Abyss Order taking a sword of a fallen samurai and bringing it with them to another realm. One thing I realized was that while many people assume that Mitsunari used the sword in his battle against the Traveler, there is no clue whatsoever that this was the case. It was actually very unlikely that he did. If you take a look at the treasure tales of the Joken Shinkageuchi, where it says that no famous craftsman merely forges one blade in one sitting. The greatest of their works are known as Shinuchi, and are given a lovely name before being offered to the craftsman's lord or deity. These are not built for taking lives and are to remain pure. The others are known as Kageuchi and will be given to retainers for them to use as weapons. The Hakuen Michimitsu Amenoma was most likely one such Shinuchi, since we know it had a Kageuchi, namely the Amenoma Kageuchi that Michihiro gave to the Simon clan of Konda village. Still, chances are that Mitsunari did possess the blade at some point in his life, since in their dialogue, Arashi and Toraemon address the blade as Mitsunari's sword. Maybe Mitsunari lost the sword at some point, which would fit with him thinking of himself as a failure and not fit to continue the Iwakura dojo. The blade we find under the waterfall is rusted and seems to have been in the water for a while. So I guess it was there for at least some time before Mitsunari challenged the Traveler, but this is really hard to say. According to Google, visual signs of rust can appear after only a few weeks, and I don't think there is a proper timeline for when those quests are supposed to happen in-game, since they are both optional, so saying that the sword has been there before is probably the safer bet. The Shrine Maiden that leads us to Enkanomiya told us that the gate has already been open for a short time before we went on our quest, so there might have been some others who were able to enter unnoticed. And so far, I think this is maybe not the most interesting, but the most likely scenario. Mitsunari lost or sold the sword at some point before or when he lost his vision, probably to some Kairagi or wandering mercenary. After all, there are some of them famously lurking around Watatsumi Island. That mercenary most likely snuck into Enkanomiya after the entrance opened, probably looking for treasure, but quickly fell victim to the Vishaps. The only thing I cannot really make sense of is the position of the sword. It is stuck straight in front of a waterfall. To me, this looks very intentionally placed. But so far, this is all just speculation. I'd love to hear any theories or ideas that you guys might have about how the sword got there. Maybe I have missed something very important. If you have any interesting thoughts, just leave a comment below. There is one thing in Enkanomiya that puzzles me. Now, this could be a coincidence, since there is nothing whatsoever that supports this theory, and I cannot even establish a proper timeline. But the central building in Enkanomiya is called the Dainichi Mikoshi, the same name using the same Chinese characters as the surname of Mikoshi Chiyo. Now, this can easily be coincidence. The translation just means something like Great Sun Monument, with Mikoshi referring to some kind of religious item. However, if you want to speculate, it is not impossible that Chiyo, after she was defeated by A, fled to Enkanomiya as a place to hide. It is actually a quite reasonable choice. From there, she might have had some influence on the construction of the tower. What this influence could be, however, I have no idea, since there's nothing in the history of Enkanomiya or Chiyo that suggests any kind of connection. So I will leave it at that, but it is still an interesting fact that I wanted to mention. Now, the sword is the last remnant of the Iwakura art. Or is it? There is actually one other thing. During his lifetime, someone made puppets based on Iwakura Michihiro, using his memories and his sword fighting style. While immensely powerful, most of these puppets broke and were discarded, but some of them can still be found in various corners of Teyvat. They call them a Magu Kenki, but what exactly is a Magu Kenki and why was it made? This is also something that cannot be said for sure, but we can make some educated guesses. When thinking about puppets, the first thing that comes to mind is obviously the Raiden Shogun. We know that the Raiden Shogun we encounter in Inazuma is not the Electro Archon herself, but only a machine, a puppet that serves as an avatar for A, who herself resides at the plane of Euthymia inside So Ishin, the sword gifted to her by her sister Makoto. A's second character story reads, "This limited time troubled A greatly, until one day when a mysterious technique came before her eyes as if by a stroke of fate. Using such techniques, one could create intricate puppets indistinguishable from true life. In theory, this puppet could perfectly imitate everything about A. It could surpass the limits of her lifespan and defend Inazuma forever. Yet, how could creating a copy of an Archon be a simple affair? A conducted countless experiments to this effect, disregarded a great many failed products, and spent an unimaginable amount of time and resources. As a matter of fact, A has lost her original body over 2000 years ago in the Archon War. The book Treasure Tales of the Choken Shinkageuchi, which A herself considers to be fairly accurate, states that A gave up her body to help her sister ascend to Celestia and claim the position as an Archon. As Makoto returned from Celestia, she used her newly claimed powers to restore A so that she could still be at her side as a Kagemusha. While it could be possible that the Magu Kenki was but another of A's attempts in puppet making, it seems unlikely to me. There is not a single reference to the Electro Archon's involvement in the Magu Kenki's creation, while the rest of the game attributes even the smallest thing happening in Inazuma to her. The absence of any reference to A or Makoto seems very deliberate. Also, while there have been many things in Inazuma that relate to the actions of the Electro Archon, they always have some connections to their element, Electro. The Magu Kenki, on the other hand, uses cryo and animo elements. There is, however, one puppet that A created that we know more about, and while I do not think that he had any hand in the creation of the Magu Kenki, looking at this specific individual leads to some other interesting pieces of information that we can piece together. I am, of course, talking about Scaramouche, the Wanderer, the Balladeer, 6 of the Fatui Harbingers, Kunikuzushi, or the Kabukimono. Scaramouche was one of A's earlier attempts to create a puppet. The puppet, however, cried at his creation, and A thought it would not be able to fulfill the role she had in mind. Yet, she did not see this as a reason to destroy him, but let him continue to live and sleep at Shakai Pavilion.
Came about as a byproduct of creating the Shogun. Perhaps it's because I feel like I owe him something, but I do not wish to assert control over him.
Among all the people who influenced Scaramouche during his life, the most notable might be the second of the Fatui Harbingers, Dottore. Dottore, or the Doctor, has already encountered Scaramouche in Inazuma during the events at Tatarazuna, where he disguised himself as a mechanic from Fontaine by the name of Escher. While this was probably not the goal of his mission, the Doctor was very interested in the puppet Scaramouche, or Kabukimono as he was known by then. Which would make sense, since we know that one of the things that makes the Doctor so powerful and influential is that he's actually not a single person, but in possession of various bodies or segments.
Negotiate with me? I heard you had already left Sumeru. Why are you here again now?
I left Sumeru, But I also stayed in Sumeru. Even the god of wisdom is restricted by the habits of cognition. How disappointing.
You mean there are many different versions of you in this world?
An astute guess.
Puppet-making techniques had their roots in Khaenri'ah, and his nature as a creation of the Electro Archon made him all the more special. The Doctor was fascinated by this field of study, and using the Wanderer as a foundational blueprint, would perform research and experiments for several decades before finally attaining the techniques that would go on to form the basis for his segments. Since the Doctor was so interested in the art of puppet making, it might not be far-fetched that he was actually the one who created the Magokenki as an early experiment. This probably happened even before his encounter with Scaramouche at Tatarazuna, since Iwakura Michihiro lived about 500 years ago and the Tatarazuna incident happened about 400 years ago. The description of the Magokenki said that it malfunctioned, so it might be that this was but an early experiment during the time the Doctor was stationed in Inazuma. And who knows, maybe there is even another one among the Fatui who ended up being a subject for the Doctor's experiments. One of the Magokenki was, at some point, stolen by the members of Akotomeki's pirate crew. They got lost at sea and stranded at the Golden Apple Archipelago, where the puppet was lost. While mostly idle, the puppet does activate when it senses danger, to the extent that it even protects some of the people who live on the island at that point. I don't know, but I actually like the idea that even though detached from any living person, the Iwakura art still finds some use and some meaning, even in the most unlikely places. If you stuck around till the end, thank you for watching. I really hope you enjoyed the video. I actually had a lot of fun to delve into the lore of this game and to piece together the stories it tells. If you do too, please like the video and subscribe to my channel. It doesn't cost anything, but it lets me know that the time spent on it was worth it and that I should keep on making videos like this in the future. Also, feel free to leave any suggestions you have in the comment section. I'm not perfect, I might have forgotten to talk about something vital, and I'm happy to learn about new facts or theories. Otherwise, I hope I see you guys soon. Have a great day, and bye bye.